Sometimes the line between true crime entertainment and real-life justice, it gets completely blurred, and that's exactly what we're looking at today. So let's just jump right in with a wild question. Can a TV show actually solve a murder? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a movie, right? But as we're about to find out, sometimes truth really is stranger than fiction. Alright, so our story actually kicks off not with a crime scene, but with a confession. And the way it was triggered, well, it was completely unexpected. Picture this. It's March 2016 in Lunel, France. Two friends are just, sitting on the couch watching a national true crime show. And the episode they're watching, it's about a local guy who just vanished. A case that had been officially cold for almost 2 years. And as the show goes on, something just snaps. One of the friends, a woman named Audrey, she just completely cracks. Right there, she confesses this absolutely horrifying secret to her friend, who, understandably, calls the police the very next day. But to really get what just happened, we've got to rewind. We have to go back to the very beginning. Okay, so let's jump back in time and see how this all started. We need to meet the man at the very center of this whole mystery. His name was Patri Ewire, but everyone called him Patri. So, it's June 23rd, 2014. Patrick, who's 49, is rushing from his job to go on a date. He was a guy who was really trying to get his life back on track, and this date was one of the few bright spots he'd had in a long time. He never came back. Now, Patri's life, it was complicated. He was a loving father to his 12-year-old daughter, Alabama, and he was absolutely desperate to make it to her dance recital later that night. But he also had his demons. He was divorced after he'd struck his wife while he was drunk, and he really struggled with binge drinking and gambling. He worked as a hospital janitor, and to make things even more tangled, he'd had an affair with a married coworker who, tragically, later died by suicide. So, his last known act, he parks his scooter to meet up with an old flame, a woman named Audrey Lou. They were going for a walk in a park, right near some old caves. He actually locked his phone under the scooter seat and just walked off with Audrey. And then, poof, he was gone. So when Patris doesn't show up, his brother, Mark, reports him missing. And that's when the investigation kicks off, led by a detective named Boris Freya. But right from the start, there were way too many questions and almost no answers. Okay, so one of the first big clues, and it's a critical one, comes from Patri's own daughter. She tells police she saw her dad giving a package to some mysterious man in a tunnel just a week earlier, and she overheard him saying he owed money to some very dangerous people. So right away, the investigation starts to focus on two main people, and this really created a classic dilemma for the detective. On one hand, you've got Audrey Lou, the last person to see him alive. She's the ex-girlfriend who just rekindled contact, but her story is, well, it's vague. She says he just walked her to a bus stop and left, but she can't remember which way he went. Then, on the other hand, you have Remy Shen. He's the husband of Patri's former lover, the one who died. He's got a pretty weak alibi, says he was cleaning a storage unit all by himself, and when the police question him, he's so confident, he actually laughs at them. Yet Remy was almost too confident. He basically scoffed at the idea that he'd hold a grudge for 5 whole years without doing anything about it. To him, it just didn't add up. And with that, the detective was pretty much at a dead end. So you've got no body, you've got these conflicting stories, the investigation just completely stalled. And then, a grim discovery was made that only made the mystery even deeper. About 3.5 weeks after Patrice disappeared, some teenagers were out exploring those caves, not even half a mile from where he left his scooter, and they found a body. It was Patrice. But the scene, well, it just raised a whole lot more questions than it answered. Here's why. The body was charred. There was one bullet hole in his head and another in his torso. This screamed mob-style execution, a professional organized crime hit. So investigators immediately thought of what his daughter said, the man in the tunnel, the gambling debts. But here was the problem. They dug, and they could never find a single shred of evidence that Patriot had the kind of massive debts that would lead to a professional hit like this. And so, the investigation just froze. Nothing. June 2014, Patri disappears. July, his body is found. And then, silence. By late 2015, with no new leads, the case was officially declared cold. The police had Audrey and Remy under surveillance, but they got nothing. For Patri's family, it felt like all hope for justice was just fading away. But Patri's brother, Mark, he wasn't having it. He refused to give up. He felt like if the police couldn't solve it, he was going to take matters into his own hands. And he decided to bring the case to the one place he knew could get everyone's attention: national television. And that brings us right back to where we started, to that night, on that couch, where a TV show was about to do what nearly 2 years of police work just couldn't. The very next morning, Detective Fryer gets a call. It's from Audrey's friend, Sophie, and she tells him everything. Her friend Audrey Lou had just confessed the whole story. Seeing Patri's brother on screen pleading for justice for his family, that was the trigger. The guilt just became unbearable for Audrey, and this entire sinister plot finally came pouring out. So here was the plan. It turns out the killer wasn't some mob hitman. It was Remy Shen. He had been secretly dating Audrey, his accomplice. He used her to lure Patri into a trap. He hid and waited for them to enter a cave he'd already picked out. Then he forced Audrey to tie Patri up with duct tape. After she fled, he murdered Patri with 2 shots. And to make sure she kept quiet, he threatened her children. It was all a cold, calculated plan for a long-awaited revenge. So on March 31st, 2016, just a few days after that true crime show aired, both of them were arrested. When it all went to trial, Remy Shen was found guilty of murder and sentenced to 30 years. And Audrey Lou, for her role as an accessory to kidnapping, got 12 years. The court recognized that he had manipulated her into the whole thing. So you have to wonder, right? How many other secrets are just out there, waiting for the right story to bring them into the light? Because in the end, it wasn't a DNA match or some forgotten clue that cracked this case. It was a brother's love, and the unbelievable power of a story told to millions.